Welcome to the Muscle Expert Podcast with Ben Pakulski, one of the world's top professional bodybuilders, an expert on human performance and mindset mastery. Ben dives deep to deliver the strategies of the top experts to upgrade your body, mind, muscle, strength, performance, biochemistry, and how to become the upgraded modern man. Join us on benpakulski.com to learn the cutting-edge techniques to take control of your body, your brain, and create your greatest life.
What's up, ladies and gents? Welcome back. Muscle Expert Podcast, another amazing episode. As always, we're going out and finding the best guests, and this guy is absolutely no exception. Three-time world record holder. For anyone who wants to get strong, start paying attention to what this guy has to say. He is a mountain of a man. He's the creative director of the Mountain Athlete Warrior Program for the U.S. Army, in charge of making firefighters strong across the country. Master's degree at Ball State, worked with Bill Kramer directly and a number of other amazing guys. I know he's been working with Charles Poliquin directly and working with Ed Coan directly. A lot of guys who are the who's who in the strength industry come to Matt Wenning for advice and programming. Matt, welcome, man.
Thank you.
Dude, yeah, you've been popping up absolutely everywhere lately for me, and I've definitely been paying attention to the conversation. Because every man wants to be strong, like regardless, or should want to be strong. The trend right now is biohacking. I want to biohack my testosterone levels, and the comedy is, well, just go fucking lift something heavy. Be strong, right? Be strong. Everybody's shining light on their balls, but they're not willing to go do heavy deadlifts or squats. And to me, like, the original biohack is let's go out and get strong, right? Ultimately.
Yeah, if your body's not going to make testosterone if it doesn't need to repair anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think I see anything like that, and what it does to me is they're trying to take stuff that applies to the top 1% that's busted their ass their whole life or at the peak of whatever they have, and they need to biohack perhaps.
Sure.
But what that does is it trickles down and it sells this biohacking or all this other retarded shit to people that don't even want to work out hard. And to me, you got to put your time in order to make that stuff even valuable. It's kind of like, not getting on a tangent, but it's kind of like anabolic steroids. You give them to a high school kid that benches 200 pounds, it's going to get him to 250,
Yep.
But it's never going to make him to 500.
Dude, that's exactly what I was thinking. Is like that. Those are the people that benefit, right? The guys who are really pushing it at all levels, burning the candle at both ends, smashing, and then they need that 1% or even that 5% boost in testosterone to push them to that world record or push them to that next level. Those are the guys that are going to benefit from steroids, or those are the guys that are going to benefit from, biohacking their testosterone. Not these armchair CEOs, entrepreneurs, right?
No, and a lot of times the reason that your testosterone's fucked up in the first place is because you're inflamed. You're eating incorrect types of nutrients that's causing all kinds of chemical damage to your body, and your body no longer wants to make estrogen or testosterone. And then the byproduct of that is a defense mechanism for most people is creating estrogen.
Yep.
So an estrogen is a defense mechanism caused by inflammation. So lack of zinc, lack of anti-inflammatory diet as far as dairy goes. People eat too much dairy and too much wheat and gluten. So what I usually find is that biohacking is as simple as cleaning up your fucking diet.
Isn't it though, man? That's the irony of it, right? Is every guy out there is like, oh, how could I hack my testosterone? And it's like, well, how about losing fucking 20 pounds? Ultimately,
how about not be 30% body fat? That might help.
Yeah, and with how much inflammatory food you speak of, like it's massive, and it's unfortunate. Like, people don't realize that the if it fits your macros diet is huge right now. And sure, can you get in shape doing it or doing it if it fits your macros? Of course you can, but is it optimal? Is it going to drive more inflammation? Yes, it will. So how's that going to affect your hormones? Massively, right? So I want to start by talking about that, man. It's like, I know you train a lot of guys. You train yourself, obviously, to a world-class level. You train a lot of high-end athletes. What are some strategies you use to mitigate inflammation in strength athletes? Because obviously that's a huge concern with guys squatting, 600, 700, 800 pounds. Is it supplemental protocols? Is it nutritional protocols? Or do you have some, quote unquote biohacks you're using for these guys that are lifting heavy and burning the candle at both ends?
Well, the first thing that you have to realize is that inflammation and pain, if we can put those two together, which sometimes are very likely together, is usually a direct result of overtraining an exact motor pattern too much.
Yep.
So what I find is that people that want to say, let's say a simplistic goal, be a better squatter. Well, then they squat with a straight bar every fucking week all the time. Well, and then they don't change the resistance types. They don't change the tempos. They don't change the ranges of motion. All the things that you would have to change consistently. Once you learn that there's a bigger library than just squats, benches, and deadlifts, and there's mixtures of all forms of those lifts and different types of resistances and positions, then you can start creating a rotational thought pattern that allows you to get very strong and very different environments while not creating an inflammatory response or an overuse tendonitis issue in one particular area. So what I'm pretty famous for is squatting very different all the time. So when I did an 865.5 squat in a belt only, under 300 pounds, I squatted with a straight bar 3 times in 15 weeks to get ready.
So yeah, dude, I call it rotating your tires, right? Like,
so what I found is that if I trained with a straight bar too often, my lower back and my knees started to give me issues. So what I found was if I rotated bars and resistance types, I kept inflammation at bay. It didn't happen nearly as often, and it felt like I didn't overuse a particular movement too much while still being able to squat every week.
Right.
So I find that a lot of people don't utilize that thought pattern when training, and then they just run certain exercises all the way to the ground. Giving you an example, I do a lot of assessments for people. They'll contact me via email, and then I'll look at videos of what they do, and then I'll give them feedback. And what I find is people that have, like, say, well, how can you do JM presses? Don't those hurt your elbows? Not if I only do them every 6 weeks.
Right.
But people will see a JM press or an exercise, and they'll do it for a month straight, and then they wonder why it hurt their elbow.
Right.
So point being is I think rotation and having a big, vast exercise library is very important to making sure that those things stay at bay.
So Matt, let's talk what that looks like, man. So obviously you're world class at squatting and powerlifting, and what types of squats, like let's assume these people don't have a clue what you're talking about. What types of variations are you implementing to rotate your tires, to use my terminology?
First most important rotation to implement is to find 4 to 6 exercises that you're absolutely fucking terrible at. So if I want a squat to be hard for me, very hard for me, I have a fairly long torso for how much I can squat. I use a safety bar and make my torso longer. It makes it even worse. So I use a safety bar probably once every 3 weeks in order for my body to actually get maximally taxed in a bad position. So what I find is that people go to the gym to tend to pat themselves on the back versus kick themselves in the balls.
Absolutely, man. Do what everyone does what they're good at, right?
I do a back padding workout every 3rd week, and every week in between I do something that kicks me in the balls. So point is, I've mastered how to squat with a straight bar. I know how to do it perfectly. Therefore, doing it more is just going to cause more problems. So what I do is I find exercises that want to break me versus pat me on the back.
Man, I want to talk about that. So, you're a world-class squatter, and I try to teach this to everybody, and you just said it, and just to reiterate what you said, squatting is a skill, and everyone thinks, to become a better squatter, you need to squat. It's just such a misconception. So I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah, I think in the beginning and the intermediate phases, you might have to have more straight bar work to perfect it, but once it's perfected, you have to find other means of creating a rise in that strength. So I found that squatting with a straight bar and straight weight worked for me up until about a 600-pound squat, and then to get to 700, 800, and 900 pounds, my body had to have vastly different stimuli in order to do that, because it would learn exercises very, very quickly. Well, after you learn an exercise, the only thing you can change is intensity, and you can only go up so heavy so often before your body just shuts down.
Breaks, yep.
So what I find is the most important thing you can change is the mode, by meaning the exercise. So if people could rotate more exercises, they'd be stronger, and they would last longer to keeping that inflammation and overtraining away. And that's what I think is important for tactical populations, and why my thought pattern works so well is that, with firemen and military, you don't really have a good conception of what you're going to be involved in that day. You could walk in and a heavier person's fell between the bathtub and the toilet. You could walk into the grocery store and somebody's sprawled out in the dairy section. All different positions and things you could possibly think of could arise. Mm-hmm. With that being said, you can't really train for each of those environments specifically and individually. You have to just be strong everywhere.
Right.
And all different foot, back, hand positions, because you don't really know what's going to be called upon for your body to be taxed at. So having a conjugate or rotational thought pattern and getting strong in multiple positions and pathways makes you a more viable athlete. But it also gives you longevity.
So let's talk about what your training and inflammation protocols look like when you were at your best, man. I think that's an important conversation to have. Like, you know, when you were training to be the best in the world, I'd first like to have the discussion about, you know, exactly what modalities you were using to improve your strength. So was it like accommodating resistance? Was it auxiliary exercises and specifics? Just because people are listening, like, I don't really know where you're going. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
That my particular weaknesses on the squat used to be how much hip drive I had. My legs were insanely strong. So I trained a lot of sumo deadlifts, which I would strongly recommend for everybody listening to this to be very proficient at sumo deadlifting before you learn how to conventional. And I'll tell you my thought pattern on that. My thought pattern on that is that sumo deadlift increases hip mobility. One of the biggest problems with lower back injuries in the tactical field and in the athletic field is lack of hip mobility.
Right.
So if somebody doesn't have mobile hips, their back's going to be compromised. Sumo deadlift creates a mobile hip, but conventional deadlift does not. So what I find is with my tactical, and this is kind of a trick or a secret, is I make them all proficient at sumo deadlifting before they even learn conventional. And what I find is it forces them to use more hip flexibility and more hip strength. And then once I've balanced that with the leg strength, now we have a more complete person that's balanced everywhere.
Do you notice as you're teaching people sumo deadlifts that you see any back issues? Because if someone's lacking hip mobility and they're going into a sumo deadlift, may predispose themselves to back injuries?
I do not. What I find is that a stiff back or lack of hips makes you more dangerous to pull conventional than sumo. So in a sumo deadlift, if your hip's not really flexible, you're just not going to be able to lift the weight. And you're not going to be able to do it even close to mechanically correct, so it limits your strength gain, right? Or your strength amount you can lift. In a conventional deadlift, you just lock your fucking legs out and use your whole back.
Right.
So sumo is also much more protective of the low back than conventional, because the conventional position puts you in a leg drive, and your legs, for most people, can lift a lot more than your back, and then your back's compromised. In the sumo position, your leg drive is not going to help you nearly as much, so therefore it makes everything a little more balanced.
Makes sense. You tend to be more upright, right?
Yes, yes. So my point is that always be focusing on your weaknesses. So in my training, my hamstrings and my glutes were my weak spots. Once those came up, by picking exercises that made those areas have to work harder, deeper box squats, pause squats, things of those natures, then it raises your maximal strength. So what you have to remember is that look at your body as a big log chain, and you have all of these different links that can hold thousands of pounds, and then the last link holds 10. That chain's only 10 pounds strong. Mm-hmm. So I don't think people think about that. They go in, most people go in and generally train and say, I've worked every muscle, but what did you focus on? The main focus, 70% of a workout, should be your weaknesses and shortcomings, not your strengths. And that can apply to almost anything. So what I find is that 90%, or roughly in that range, of all tactical and athletic endeavors are lacking posterior strength, which is low back, glutes, hamstrings, and upper back. Those areas are the limiting factors that are not letting the other factors shine. So I would say for half of the people I've ever seen in the bench press, their upper back wasn't strong enough for their triceps, delts, and pecs to do what they were supposed to do, because it changed their scapular position when they bench pressed.
Yep.
So if their upper back's not strong enough to hold position, then the other muscles won't do what they're supposed to do. Conversely, the same thing on a squat or a deadlift. You can have the strongest legs in the world, but if your lower back's not strong, your legs are going to put you in bad positions, and then you're not going to be able to lift nearly as much or as safely. So you would be wise to train your lower back harder than any of the other muscles until it catches up, which could be anywhere from 12 to 36 months.
Wow.
That's why I think you don't hear people talk about this, because there's no 12-week fix in any of this shit. This stuff takes months, if not years. So if I have an athlete come to me or a fireman and they have really weak hamstrings, I put them on a 36-month program to fix it. That's 3 fucking years.
Amazing. So if you're trying to get up your squat, obviously you're trying to be a great squatter. So was most of your auxiliary training different types of squatting, or was it did you do other supportive work as well?
So I try to mix and match everything, but the way you can squat every week and raise your squat is to have that squat just different enough that the pressure gradients, resistances, and ranges of motion change constantly, but also specifically to your weak point.
Right.
So what I do is I'll rotate a straight bar, then a camber bar, then a safety bar. And then I will do some sort of free weight, chain, and band. Then I'll change the height of the box or the foot position. Those things are varied, almost like I'm picking a number out of a hat. And that way my body is always having to adjust to something every week. It's never getting the exact same stimulus. It's still a squat, but it's not exactly the same squat it was last week. That changes things. Well, these little micro changes in your training allow you to push really, really hard week in and week out and not overtrain.
So at what level, I know a lot of people are saying, well, obviously squatting is a skill. So at what level is it necessary for them to just repeat the skill? Like, obviously you're doing all these little changes. That's awesome. But as you're coming into a contest, I'm sure there may be some point where you go, okay, well, now I just need to back squat for a while.
It depends on the goal. Like, you got to remember that probably 95% of the people that I train are not powerlifters.
Right.
There are people that want to use powerlifting to be better athletes, soldiers, or firemen,
sure,
or something of that nature.
That would be different, of course, yeah.
So my point is that sometimes you got to look at the long game and not the short game. So I find that the first 5 to 10 years of training, you're probably going to have to use a straight bar at least every other week. And like I said, don't actually quote me on this, but I would say if I had to just make a comment, it would be you need to squat with a straight bar every other week to maintain and gain the specificity of form. After 5 to 7 years, you need to start rotating that more often because if you haven't mastered that skill by 5 to 7 years, you probably don't need to be doing the movement, right? So after 5 to 7 years, your body needs more stimuli in order to grow. After that point, it has to be very variable. So what I find is, like I told you, to break 2 world records raw in the squat, I squatted 3 times in 15 weeks with a straight bar to get ready for that. So how am I able to break world records and only squat a straight bar every 5 weeks?
Right.
And when I do those 5 weeks, I don't necessarily max. I actually use a linear periodization protocol. So I'll do like 80% for 5, and then 5 weeks later I'll do 85 or 87% for 4, and then I'll do 90% for 2 or 3, and then I go to break a world record. Wow. In between those weeks, I'm doing things very different. Safety bars, bands, chains, boxes, weird stuff, making my body have to second guess what it does every week. What I find is that training that way for tactical divisions and people that want to stay in good shape, it allows you to train very, very hard without overreaching because you're not doing the specific exact movement every week.
How much are you paying attention to tempo? So let's assume you're trying to break a world record, in 6 months. How much are you paying attention to tempo or varying tempo, if at all?
So the varying tempo has to come in the off season because timing is a huge thing with how much you want to squat, bench, or deadlift. If you're used to doing, if you're changing the tempos up so much that your body doesn't have a natural timing anymore, it can be a problem. So what I find is my tempo training comes when I consider myself an off-season train. That's less than or more than 20 weeks away from a competition. So before that, or after 20 weeks and closer to a competition comes, I let my body do its natural position or speed. That way, whatever, if it's a safety bar, a box squat, or whatever, I go down and come up the speed in which my body wants to flow instead of trying to change it. But in the off season, I vary it 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up. But it also depends on what the goal is, because what is my need at that time? If I come off of a competition or I'm watching one of my firemen, I'm like, hey, he's getting stronger, but his legs are the size of fucking Snickers bars. Well, I'm going to slow his tempos down in the off season and build his fucking leg mass up.
Right.
But if I got a guy that has 33-inch thighs, I don't need him to do hypertrophy, so I don't really need the eccentric loading. I don't need to control that. So it depends on the person. If you need muscle mass, slow it down. If you need more power, speed it up. So all of that stuff has variability, but it also still has a huge component of making sure that you're training what you need at that time.
How many times a week were you squatting or training, posterior chain and leg strength, or even lower back strength when you were training to break world records?
That's a really good question. So if you read a lot of pretty in-depth books, they'll talk about the law of 72 hours. If you look at a law of 72 hours, it's going to tell you that you really can't train similar motor patterns or muscle groups more than every 3 days, or your body's going to central nervous system or muscularly overtrain. So I have found for the last almost 20 years of competing that training legs every 72 hours was the bee's knees as far as getting awesome. So these programs of squatting every day, these programs of doing like Chico stuff where you're squatting 3 or 4 times a week is fucking ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And it might be good for peaking for a short lifespan, but you don't find guys that have been competing and been at the top for more than 10 or 15 years doing anything like that.
Right.
Because you just can't sustain that kind of volume.
Or if they do, they break. Like they may peak once and then something blows out, right?
Exactly.
So when you're training, let's walk through the 72 hours after one of those workouts. Let's say we're coming into a meet, and we know we've got to squat again in 72 hours. We just finished a big leg session or a big training session. What does it look like nutritionally as far as mitigating inflammation, as far as maximizing nutritional uptake, and how much attention was paid to that? Or for you, was it just basically calories at that point?
No, it was huge. I'll tell you, the one thing I could go back and change was the stuff that I learned from Poliquin and Stan Efferding, which was getting my carbohydrates from rice-based products instead of wheat and fucking dairy. Because rice, you can get the carbohydrate and insulin surges without the inflammation. So what I find now is that I'll replenish my workouts depending on what time of year I'm in. If I'm in a year where, in the part of the year where I'm just trying to be athletic and healthy, I replenish with about 100 grams of carbs, mostly white rice or something of that nature. I'm a big fan of ATP Lab stuff, the Pentacarb. That they make that out of basically rice and potato, and it's kind of tastes awesome, but it's really easy for me at the gym because I don't always get to go away and make food. But long story short, if you can use white rice, depending on how much muscle mass you have and where your goal is at that time, in the off season when I'm trying to lean out, I replenish with 100 grams, and when I'm trying to put muscle mass on and be powerful, I replenish with 200 grams. This is immediately post workout. The rest of the day is anywhere from 150 to 250 grams of rice-based carbohydrate. That is no sugar. So I don't drink anything with any sugar in it, I drink water and tea. That's all I drink. I don't really eat any candy or any of that nature. So basically what I'm saying is try to get your carbohydrates from rice so it's low inflammation. That will help stimulate your insulin to help put on muscle and replenish muscle glycogen without the inflammatory process and issues. Protein-wise, I try to get around 350 to 400 grams a day, and doing that in 45 and 50 grams a serving.
And what's your body weight, Matt?
My body weight right now is 288. So when I'm trying to get back up to 300 right now. So I take 400 grams of protein, and I probably eat 350 to 400 grams of rice-based carbohydrate a day, and then my fat's fairly high as well. So if you're not worried about being super strong, your carbs can come way down. You can get a little leaner. But I find that as a bigger athlete, it's very, very hard to be strong with under 200 grams of carbs per day.
Sure.
And I learned that from Stan Efferding. Because in my opinion, Stan is probably one of the few guys on the planet that has learned how to be insanely powerful and insanely lean.
And lean, yeah.
You see a lot of these guys that are really lean and they look amazing. They're weak as shit. Mm-hmm. Then you look at guys that are built and that have no muscle mass, but or they have a lot of muscle mass, but also a lot of body fat, and nobody wants to be built like that either.
Right.
Stan, in my opinion, is one of the few guys in the world that's figured out both. He can deadlift 800, he can squat 800, he can bench 600, and he can look like he could step on a bodybuilding stage.
Well, it's because he's a soldier with his nutrition, right? So many guys just eat what they want. Stan's like, no, man, I got to eat steak every meal, I got to eat rice every meal, I got to eat veggies every meal. Like he's a fucking soldier.
Yep, exactly. And he's one of the quintessential people of he didn't have the genetics. I mean, I saw pictures of him in high school, and he was 150 pounds.
Yep.
Not built well.
Right.
So, it's possible for anybody to be built well, and to be strong. I think it just depends. Genetics depends on how fast it happens. You know what I mean? I mean, if it's going to take you 20 years to be what you want to be, or it's going to take you 5, that's genetics.
Sure. So how much did you play with fat intake and fat sources, and did you notice any difference with that as far as its ability to mitigate inflammation?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of coconut oil. I cook everything in it, and I drink a lot of olive oil or cooked olive oil, but I actually got that from Poliquin, taking in more coconut oil. That's initially how he helped me break off of carbohydrates so much about 3 years ago. I used a lot of coconut oil, and I think coconut oil is really still, even at this point, very underutilized. It's a great medium chain triglyceride, and it's an awesome fat source, and it's also very, very needed on a low carbohydrate diet. That's just my opinion and what I've went through. The leanest I've gotten was I weighed 262, and I was right at 13% body fat. So I was pretty lean by following what Charles and Stan were doing, But I think a lot of the problem is most people have abused carbohydrates their whole life so much that they can't use them correctly. Their insulin acts incorrectly. So what I would recommend for most people reading this is go off of carbs for about 2 weeks, increase your fat and your salt. Once your body learns to use carbs again, which is usually about a 14-day reset, put it back in and use non-inflammatory carbohydrates such as rice to replenish glycogen stores and then even feeds throughout the day.
It's funny. I'm doing something similar to that right now, man. I'm eating carbs about every 5 days. My strength going up because I went through this phase where my body was used to using fats. And as soon as I put those carbs back in, I actually noticed a pretty big bump in my strength after 3 days. It's fascinating to see how little your body can get used to using.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's the thing is you're actually probably using those carbs correctly now.
Yep.
Whereas most people, you almost have to go through a deficit for a while for the body to learn to utilize carbs correctly.
And starting to get rid of inflammation. That's the big thing is you got all the cellular junk, right?
Yeah, like what Mark Bell and them's doing with the keto. It's awesome. But you use keto as a means to an end to come back to using carbs correctly. Right. I think that's where people fuck up. They go keto and then that's all keto, but then they start chewing off too much muscle. It's hard to eat enough calories to stay bigger. If you want to be a fucking skinny fat body at 140 pounds, it's not hard to go keto. Right. But if you want to weigh 275 and be lean as shit, keto is very hard. But my point is you use a keto start to come back to being able to use carbs correctly.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, man, because most people attach to one, camp. They're vegetarian or they're keto or they're fucking if it fits your macros, and they don't realize that it depends on what you're trying to do. It depends on what your training's like. All these things are variable. You can't be a world-class athlete and be a ketogenic athlete. I firmly believe that. I mean, your performance suffers no matter what. No matter what. Your body's meant to run off of carbs, but you have to teach it to utilize fats, and you have to use carbs correctly, and you have to use the right carbs. And by meaning right carbs, non-inflammatory carbs. Absolutely. Because we know the inflammation shuts down. We're back to what we talked about maybe before you started taping, but your testosterone hacking comes a lot from controlling your inflammation. So if you're not controlling your inflammation due to a shitty diet and you're eating whatever you want, that might be why your testosterone's fucked up. So maybe if a doctor is just so quick to jump you and put you on testosterone replacement without trying to get you off your shitty diet, maybe you need to find another doctor or talk to somebody who knows what the fuck they're doing. Right. So Matt, for somebody looking to be world class in strength, what does your sleep look like, man? Like, how much are you paying attention to sleep? Are you like a big sleeper? Are you doing things to kind of quote unquote hack your sleep supplementally, or what? That's important. Those are an important part of any athlete's protocol, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. This is huge. Me and we got the same question when me and Eddie Coan and Charles Poliquin did those big seminars in Prague and Amsterdam. Yep. You know what the similarity between me and Eddie was? And I'm not putting myself in Eddie's caliber. The dude broke fucking 70 world records. I broke 3. Okay? But let me give you a point. Me and Eddie both sleep 12 hours a day. Wow. So we sleep 8 hours, and then we take anywhere from a 2 to a 3.5 hour nap every day. Wow. He did, and I did. And I didn't talk to him about before that. And it was amazing that we shared the same thing. And the point is that do you need that much sleep to be stronger than the average person? And the answer is hell no. You do not. But if you want to be world class, you have to have that much sleep. It's not, at that point, it's not whether you can train hard. If you went back to Eddie's heyday and say 1994, his life revolved around training, but the other 22 hours of his day was just as important. He slept, he ate, he recovered, he stayed out of stressful environments, he got massages. Everything was to prepare for that 2 hours a day or however long he was training. And that's where I think people don't really want to commit. They want to say, well, if I go to the gym every day, or as we should know, 4 days a week is the most you can train. If I go to the gym 4 days a week for 2 hours, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And the answer is absolutely not. That is only a portion. And when you get really good, it's not how hard you can train, it's how well you can recover. Yep. And I think everybody's so focused on gas pedal. Everybody wants pre-workouts and nootropics and everything to work hard in the gym. But like you say, nobody pays attention to what's happening after. Let me tell you what happens. And this is kind of a generalization, but most people are a muscle car that has no fucking gas in the gas tank, and they go and floor it around the corner and do burnouts all the time. Yep. That's how we look at training. The real person fills up the gas tank, goes and expends it halfway down, and then takes it back and fills the gas tank up again.
one of the biggest pieces of information I ever got in my whole career was from a guy named Larry Pacifico, which I'm sure you know who that is.
Yep.
But 10-time world champion, never beaten in the 242s, probably one of the greatest competitors ever. And I saw him when he was in his 50s, so he'd be close to his 80s now. I was probably 13 or something like that. And I met him at a meet because he lived within a couple hours of where I grew up. And I saw him, and my buddies that I trained with were like, hey, man, that's Larry Pacifico. He's like one of the best lifters ever lived. And I went and talked to him. I was like, hey, if you had advice to like a 13-year-old, not which I was at the time, what would you give it? And he goes, when you go in the gym, always give a 9 out of 10, never a 10 out of 10. And I thought about that. I'm like, this guy's telling me to only go 9 out of 10 in the gym, never 10. And I was thinking, man, this guy's got like 9 world titles. And he said, save your 10 for 10 at meets only.
Wow.
When it really counts. And I was like, that makes sense because you know what? Larry Pacifico was never overtrained. He showed up at the meet and everybody's like, oh, I need to get one more set in. He would just show up at the meet and mop people's asses because he was fresh.
Yeah, man, even speaking to bodybuilding, that was something that I think it's human nature that you think you have to work harder than everybody else, and everybody digs a big hole that you can't get out of. And I know powerlifters do the same thing. You're 4 weeks out from a meet and you're drilling yourself into the ground, doing more volume, more frequency. All of a sudden, your nervous system's jacked up, and it takes weeks to recover from it. You're just not there.
I have seen by assessing people's workouts, I have seen people that squat 600 pounds train harder than I squat 900. More volume, more sets, more reps, more days. How is that possible? Why? Nobody goes and looks at the top and go, hey, how many times a week does Ray Williams squat?
Right.
Well, I have never seen that question on the internet. It's just, oh my God, he's super strong. The last time I talked to Ray at the Arnold Classic in March, I think he told me he does 1 light week and then 1 heavy week. Mm-hmm. So he rotates week to week. That means he does 2 heavy squat sessions a month and squats 1056 in fucking knee sleeves.
Right. Man, since I've left professional bodybuilding, my training is maybe a third of what it was before, and I'm having the hardest time. Like I'm looking not exactly the same, but pretty damn close to when I was all geared up and to when I was training twice a day. And it's incredible how much less you need than you realize.
People, I think that's what nobody asked the question is what's the minimal I need to get better, not the maximal.
Right.
And always find the minimal because you can go up from there, but you can't go up from overtraining.
I think it's important to kind of go back to what you said earlier, that the first 5 to 7 years of training, people need to learn how to do shit. Like you and I have been training for 20 plus years, so now we know how to train hard. We know how to contract muscle. We know how to do things. We have acquired these skills that now we've kind of earned the opportunity to do less. Whereas people have to go through a learning curve where maybe they have to do more. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a feel. I mean, I know when my workout's about done. I can feel my energy system's drained. I can feel my muscles are right at that point where I'm going to be able to walk out of the gym. So let me give you an example. I trained legs pretty fucking hard yesterday. I did speed squats with chains included. Over 550 pounds, was moving it at over 1 meter per second from down to up, which is basically jumping.
Are you using a Tendo unit?
I have before. So when I see it on video or watch, I can feel what the speed is. I'll have a story for that maybe later. But the point is trained very, very explosively and hard last night. And if I had to today, I could do that workout all over again.
Really?
So does that mean I didn't work out hard enough?
No, man.
But some people,
as long as you hit the stimulus, right?
Right. So I know I am very, very close to figuring out what's optimal. But the problem is it took me 25 years to figure out what's optimal for me. And then by the time you figure out what's optimal for you, you're too fucking old. You know what I mean?
I think I'm in the same boat, man.
Yep.
I had to remove myself from bodybuilding so I can kind of look objectively and see all the dumb shit I was doing. And I'm like, fuck, if I only know this 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think that's why nobody's really figured out how to do it. It's not that I don't think like you and me and like Poliquin haven't really figured it out. We figured it out too late. And then if we all stayed in our prime for 75 years, we'd be able to figure it out.
We're crushing it.
You see what I mean? But the problem is you have a short window. I mean, I'll be 40 in about a year and a half, and my window is starting to shut. You know what I mean? So, but I feel like at least I got a grasp on it young enough to do some pretty cool shit.
Yeah, and then you guys like you and me are trying to help. I mean, I'm trying to help younger guys, but they're too stupid to listen at this point, right? Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, I got to figure it out. I know what works for me. You don't have a fucking clue, but they're too stupid to listen.
This way, by doing these podcasts and putting stuff out that I can put out and trying to do those types of things, I think that the best thing I can do is just put out what I can put out, and that way I felt like I did what I could.
So speaking of that, man, what would be the advice? You go back and you see 17-year-old Matt, and you're like, hey, man, Matt, you want to be a world champion. Here's the 3 things or the 1 thing that I did wrong and that you should do better.
I'll tell you what, and this is going to sound like a total asshole, but I don't have that. And then the reason I don't is because I was very fortunate to grow up in the Midwest and close to like Chuck Vogelpool and all those guys. And I'm not saying that we did everything right, but I'm telling you that from where I came from, there's no way I could have done it better. There's just no way. I was 2 hours from Ed Coan. I used to drive up with him, and he would dial my form. I used to go and train with Chuck Vogelpool and blow my fucking brains out. I'd drive 2.5 hours to go train with Chuck's group over at Louie's place at Westside. I would drive 2.5 hours to get out of the car, stretch for 10 minutes, and have to go into big squats and big deadlifts, and then get my ass in the car and drive all the way back home to Indiana. Conversely, I used to drive up to Chicago and train with Eddie, and he would teach me my form when I was a kid. So I don't know of any other places I could have done and learned from better.
Well, I'll tell you what the lesson is in that, man, is that you had balls enough to do it, because most of the kids these days are like, oh, you're not in my town? Well, I'm not going to go. Oh, I got to drive 2 hours and then squat? Oh, I can't do that. There's your lesson, right? It's like, fucking do it. Have the balls.
The advantage to me and why I have a hard time answering the question that you originally asked is that I was never afraid to get in my car or do what I had to do to go and learn from people I had to learn from.
Get shit done.
Get shit done. That's exactly right.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Lucky. I was lucky.
You're not lucky. You put yourself in the right place, and you were obviously someone that they wanted to have around, right? So,
yeah, but my point is, it was close enough to be possible. Because if I would have lived in like Washington State,
you would have found somebody just as good, though, or not as good, but you would have found somebody.
Yeah. But my point is it was close enough to be, not out of reach, you know. And I think a lot of people like to say you're squatting down in like, I don't know, let's say Phoenix, Arizona. Who the fuck are you going to go lift with?
Right.
You're not going to go lift with Ed Coan.
Right.
You're not going to go, guys that have so much experience. It was crazy. So I was lucky and fortunate enough to be in a position to learn from guys that were absolute legends from the beginning.
But you're also smart enough to keep your mouth closed and your ears open, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't talk back to Eddie telling you how to deadlift or Chuck telling you how to squat. And I was also smart enough or humble enough to realize that I had to be around these guys, and I never got stuck in wanting to be the strongest guy at the YMCA. I wanted to be the strongest guy at the world.
Yep.
So I knew that those were the only guys that could take me there. You know what I mean?
Awesome, man. So one other question that I want to dive on is, I know you're kind of becoming known for your warm-ups. Like, you have a warm-up protocol that you go through that's apparently pretty epic, and I'd love for you to walk through it and what it is and why it's so important, and what it looks like, kind of the anatomy of it.
Yeah, not a problem. So what I do is I found that as I got stronger, I just couldn't do as much accessory work because I was just waxed at the end of doing a heavy squat cycle or a heavy deadlift cycle.
Yep.
So what I started to think about was, what if I put a couple of those key accessory movements in the front, put them before I work. This is 5-6 years ago.
Yep.
Okay. So I kept this pretty secret for a while. When I was breaking my big world records, even in gear and raw, I started realizing that I just didn't have the energy after expending it on speed squats or max effort deadlifts or whatever. So I started putting the key muscle groups in warm-ups. Well, I was sitting in this talk over in Australia in 2012, and one of these researchers guys was talking about motor unit potentiation and how you could potentiate these motor units into activating into big movement patterns. I started thinking, well, fuck, my hamstrings need more work. Why don't I just do 100 hamstring curls before I squat? Well, initially, it didn't make me stronger. It actually beat me up for a little bit. But then I lightened it up and made it to where it was just like a bodybuilder's pump. And then what I started realizing is my hamstrings started working with my squats. They actually started activating because they were potentiated.
Yep.
Well, then I was like, fuck, I'm onto something. So I started doing it with my triceps on the bench. Then I started doing it with my rear delts. Well, long story short, I started figuring out that as I slowly over the years build up the weight and build up the speed, I was able to do 300 reps of shit in a matter of a few 10, 15 minutes. Now I was able to do, like you've seen my warm-ups, I did 315 for 20 reps on the bench, rested 3 minutes, and then fucking maxed, and was still over 600 pounds. But what I found was that 315 for 20 reps, I was getting more GPP, general physical preparedness. I was getting more fit. I was putting on more muscle mass, and I was dialing in my technique. So then when I got up to those heavier weights, once I learned to recover from it, I was a fucking animal. Well, then I started experimenting with my firemen and my clients. Guess what? Same thing. If I build it up really slow over a year, those guys were getting so strong, and their technique was getting better, and their weaknesses were starting to get harder and harder to see. So there was a,
So kind of like a post-activation potentiation type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, I've got a neurophysiologist who comes down to my gym once in a while and talks about that stuff. And evidently, there's two ways that can be achieved. There's via fatigue, which is probably the route you're taking. And then there's also with isometronics. Evidently, you can, if you're doing, obviously you know what an isometronic is. If you're doing an isometronic, apparently if you view it like going to the cliff but not quite going over, so you're going up to the top of this mountain, you get right to the cliff and you stop, and you kind of feel just before that fatigue kicks in. Apparently, if you do an isometronic, even with a very low amount of weight, if you do an isometronic just to activate that exact muscle or that movement pattern you're trying to do, or those muscles you're trying to do, apparently has the exact same effect to excite the nervous system and recruit more motor neurons. So maybe something for you to play with if instead of having to do a couple hundred reps. Because I've been doing it with deadlifts, and I notice a massive difference. So I'll go to like 315 or something, pull into an immovable bar at any point in the range. You can do different points in the range, and pull into an immovable bar, and then I'll go to 6 plates, and it goes like butter.
What I find is the advantage to what I'm doing is it's building muscle mass.
Yeah.
So a lot of my guys don't have the fitness level. So them being able to do 300 reps before maxing is very, very it's very usable for normal people because you have to raise fitness level.
Yep.
So for somebody like me, I could use those isometrics and it'd probably do well for me to max deadlift. But what I find for most guys is they just don't have any muscle mass and they don't have any fitness level. So I think that higher rep range would probably be more usable for the general population and less usable, or not less usable, but just a better alternative to what you're saying. Not that what you're saying doesn't work. It just might not be as applicable because guys aren't strong enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they just don't have capacity. But, yeah, I do get what you're saying.
Absolutely makes sense, man. So what level of effort are you using with those 300 reps? Is it very, very light, or is it like you got to kind of reach fatigue, or what's the perceived exertion?
That's the hard part because it's individual. But what I find is that, it's like, okay, let's say you're a fairly untrained person and I give you 25-pound dumbbells, right? And I make you do 4 sets of 25 with hardly any rest. And then you got to do 4 sets of 25 pull downs with like 50 pounds. And then you got to do 4 sets of 25 tricep push downs with 40 pounds, all right? Those all sound reasonable for almost anybody. Mm-hmm. You get done with that as an average person, you're going to be pretty fried. But after about 6 months, you're not going to fry from that anymore, and you can go heavier. Well, then 30 pounds on the dumbbells, and then another 10 pounds on the pull downs, and then another 10 pounds on the triceps is going to feel in 6 months like what the 25s felt like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Here's my point: is slowly build up the intensity over time to where, like, I use 100-pound dumbbells for 4 sets of 25. So that's 100 reps with 200 pounds on the bench. Okay, mm-hmm. I'll do that, and in 3 minutes I'm ready to max. So the point is that it's a slow, one brick at a time build up of not really intensity. It's just 100-pound dumbbells don't fuck with me anymore. Does that make sense?
Of course.
But most people are going to see this and go, well, shit, I'll start at 60s. I can do 60s. It's too much. It's got to be enough to where the body senses that there is a volume change, but not enough to affect your central nervous system for maxing. That's different for everybody. So be truthful with yourself. If you're a weak person that has a low fitness level, start off really fucking easy. Don't go berserker. Then as you build it up over the months and the years, you'll be able to do stuff for your warm-ups that would have killed you before you would even max a year ago.
What kind of rest period are you using?
That's the problem with this system I'm trying to explain to you, is that it's a slow, steady movement. It's one brick at a time. So basically you're building a castle of warm-ups, putting one brick at a time down on a wall.
Sure, but at least it's measurable, right?
Where I got this idea from in a book that I was too stupid to realize about 15 years ago is I used to read a lot of Vasily Alexiev stuff. And what I found is he would do like 15 minutes of kettlebell swings, snatches with like the bar, he would do all this weird shit for like 15, 20 minutes straight before he even started his Olympic lifts. And he said you had to build up your fitness level in order to recover from the big movements.
Yep.
I was thinking, man, that is a smart dude, you know? But it never clicked with me that I needed to be doing that shit. So what I find is that you need to slowly, over a period of many, many months and years, build up a warm-up that would annihilate most people's workouts. So if an average guy came in and tried to do my warm-up, there's no way he could do it.
Right.
But for me, it's still my warm-up because it took me 8 years to build that up.
So you're doing 4 sets of 25, Matt. What's the rest period look like?
0. So I'll do
3
25. I'll do 25 bench presses with let's say 100-pound dumbbells, right? Then I'll do 25 pull downs with 120 pounds. Then I'll do 25 push downs with like 100 pounds. Then I go right back into presses, right back into pull downs, right back into triceps. 4 rounds of no rest, constant movement.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm winded for about 2.5 minutes. My body recovers quickly, and I'm ready to max.
Are you consuming carbohydrates or anything during that time?
No, I try to eat carbs, specifically rice, throughout the whole day, and then I start my glycogen replenishment after my main lift. So what I'll do is I'll do my warm-up, I'll do my max or my speed. Once accessories is started, that's when the Pentacarb comes in. I start sipping on 100 grams until the workout's over. So it's already in my system before I even stop lifting.
Aminos or anything like that?
I'll take aminos when I'm dieting. So when I'm dieting and I'm not getting as many carbs in, I drink more aminos.
Makes sense.
But when I'm not dieting, I just take in Pentacarb and shit like that and just eat. So I'm not a huge fan of taking supplements if I have to. But to be honest with you, I like the Pentacarb because it's simple. But if I could, I'd probably just have a bunch of rice sitting there waiting on me.
So
you know what I mean?
Are you taking anything to get your brain or your nervous system fired up for the workout? Supplement-wise?
Well, I take a lot of I actually got this from Charles, but in the morning I drink 2 tablespoons of lime juice and then 2 tablespoons of teaspoons of salt, the pink salt, Himalayan salt.
Yep.
And I mix that up and I drink that to make sure I have enough sodium. And then if I feel a little deplenished, like right now in Ohio, it's pretty fucking hot and humid. So I'll drink a mixture of salt water before I go and train. But I actually got that from Stan because he lives in Vegas.
Yep.
So they take salt tablets and then drink water before they work out, like an hour before they work out, so they have enough hydration.
That's a huge missing component for a lot of people, man. The fitness industry was so misguided through the 90s, saying, "Oh, don't eat any salt." And when I was training, I put basically as much salt as I wanted on my food, and sometimes more than I wanted. It's so important, so important.
It's huge, and it's definitely important if you don't eat a lot of carbs. So if you're low carb, you even have to have more salt.
Yep. So, man, you're working on. I know you just finished a belt squat, which is for sale. Is that for sale on your website?
Yeah. So on winningstrength.com.
Awesome. So I've got a note that you're working on some additional pieces.
Yeah. So I got a special tricep bench. Actually, we had an old Nautilus crunch machine that we used to use at Westside, and it ended up making its way over to the Elite FTS compound. And it's basically an incline bench that has a pulley system above your head.
Yep.
But when you lay at this particular incline, you can't use any shoulders to do any of the tricep movement.
Yep, I know it.
Because of the angle. So I'm actually building one of those because I don't see people have them, and I have so many questions and recommendations for how do I get my bench up. And then I would look at these assessments, and I'm like, your fucking arms are weak as shit. Right. And then all they're doing for arms is tricep pushdowns, which is awesome, but you have to have more exercises in your library. So we're coming up with that. I'm going to build a competition bench.
What's the benefit of it?
What's that?
What's the unique benefit of your competition bench?
The benefit of the competition bench is when you order it, it's going to come with a competition pad, and then it's going to have a quick disconnect fat pad. So basically, when you buy a bench, you have 2 benches built in that you can pull quick tabs, and it's really solid clearances, so you won't be able to feel that you're actually being able to quick release it, but you'll be able to change it over to a fat pad within 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then it's going to have where you rack the weight, on the J hooks. On the J hooks, I'm going to make a special J hook that comes with it that you can do Lighten method from the top and take bands, so you don't have to have a power rack.
Awesome.
So those are going to be the big advantages to that bench press.
Awesome, man. That sounds fantastic. So one more time, throw your website out for me.
Yeah, it's Winning Strength, WENNING strength.com.
Awesome.
And
so
then,
Good.
Yeah, we have equipment. We have online programming that's all customized, written based on what you guys see your weaknesses are. We have apparel, a lot of the different T-shirts and stuff. That was actually one of the coolest things with this bike trip I just did a couple months ago. Is I got to stop and see Arnold Schwarzenegger at Gold's, and I gave him 2 of my gym shirts.
Nice.
So I'm kind of waiting for him to see him wear them, at the gym and get a video of it. But
Sure.
So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to reach Matt, I'm going to throw his contact information, all of his social media stuff, and website on the show notes, which is benpakulski.com/podcasts. You can also check it out on muscleexpert.com. Matt, thanks so much, man. That dude's so helpful, and I know a lot of my listeners want to get strong, and you're the king, man.
Yeah, not a problem. Like I said, and if anybody needs help with that stuff and needs assessments or workouts, we're always glad to help people as much as we can. What I find is that people need to outreach and learn more. When I do seminars, I keep them pretty limited, but starting probably after I get done with my next meet in November, I'm going to put up a pretty good seminar list of things for people to come to the gym and not only see the equipment that we're innovating, but also be able to see this stuff and write it down on the boards and get people to practice designing workouts themselves so they learn how to be self-sufficient, because we can't always be around all the time. And, I don't have anybody write my workout. I have to write it myself.
Right.
So I'd like to get people to that point where they can think for themselves, but you have to have enough knowledge in your data bank to be able to do that. And I think people would be very wise, especially longevity-wise and performance-wise, if they're really interested in getting super strong, to be more proactive in learning how to train properly.
Awesome, man. Well, I'd love to have you out to the gym here in Tampa to do a seminar anytime. I'm sure we could definitely get a lot of people here, man. We got a big strength community in Tampa, so.
Yeah, no problem, man. Let me know.
Cool. And a little shout out to our sponsor, Bioptimizers, guys. If you're not taking digestive enzymes, proteolytic enzymes, you're not absorbing as much as you could, and you are what you absorb. You're not what you eat. So check out Bioptimizers, and they're hooking you up with a discount if you use the discount code. So check that out. benpakulski.com/podcast. Take care.
Join us on benpakulski.com to learn the cutting-edge techniques to take control of your body, your brain, and create your greatest life.